My name is Maya Caldwell. I'm 28 years old. And 3 days ago, my mother called to tell me I wasn't welcome at my own parents' 30th wedding anniversary party. It's a formal evening, she said. Her voice had that particular calmness she used when she'd already made up her mind. Your brother has invited some very important people. Investors, colleagues, the Hargrove family. You understand what I'm saying. I understood exactly what she was saying. So I spent Saturday night alone in my studio apartment in Austin, eating takeout from a Thai place down the street, watching people post their weekend plans on Instagram, while my family celebrated 30 years of marriage at a rented ballroom in Houston without me. At 9:47 p.m., my phone lit up. My brother Daniel. His voice was tight, clipped, the way it gets when he's trying not to shout. Maya. What is this? My investors are calling me right now. What did you do? What I'd done was this. At exactly 9 p.m. that evening, Voss and Lane, one of the most respected luxury brands in the country, had published a press release announcing a multi-year design collaboration with my studio, Meridian Jewelry. The deal was worth $400,000 in the first year alone. But that wasn't what had Daniel's investors calling. What had them calling was the interview I'd given to Architectural Digest the week before, the one that went live at the same moment as the announcement. The one where I explained, calmly and with documentation, how my original design language, the hand-forged geometric collection that had launched my career, had been presented to outside investors by my brother as intellectual property belonging to our family's hospitality company, the one where I said I had the emails to prove it. But before I tell you what happened that night, let me take you back to where this actually started. The Caldwell family isn't old money, but it's the kind of new money that tries very hard to look old. My father built Caldwell Hospitality Group from a single restaurant in Houston into a chain of 8 upscale venues across Texas over 20 years. My mother decorated every one of them personally. My brother Daniel stepped in as COO straight out of his MBA program, and from the day he walked through the office door in his first real suit, you'd have thought the whole thing had always been his. I was 6 years younger than Daniel and took a different path entirely. I studied art and design at UT Austin, not the business track my parents had assumed I'd follow. My mother smiled through my acceptance photos, and then told her sister on the phone that she hoped I'd grow out of it. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I heard it anyway. When I graduated, I had a specific vision. Hand-forged fine jewelry with a modern architectural quality, clean lines, unusual materials, pieces that felt like small sculptures you could wear. I moved into a 200-square-foot studio apartment in Austin and started working at a production jeweler during the day while I built my own pieces at night on a secondhand workbench I bought off Craigslist. My parents came to my graduation. They left before the reception. Daniel had a conflict, my mother said. I understood. I understood when Daniel got a corner office and I got a workbench. I understood when family dinners became quarterly strategy sessions about CHG's expansion, and I sat at the end of the table pushing food around my plate while my father asked Daniel about revenue projections. I understood when my father introduced Daniel at industry events as the future of the company, and introduced me to those same people as our daughter who does crafts. But here is what working with your hands teaches you early. Precision matters. Measurement matters. Documentation matters. Because a piece that's 1 millimeter off will never sit right, and you can't fix it by pretending the gap isn't there. So I kept records from the beginning. Every design sketch dated and photographed. Every email archived. Every conversation I had a gut feeling about. I followed up with a written summary sent to myself. I'm not sure I knew then why I was doing it so carefully. I think some part of me did. In February of the year before last, my brother called and asked me to come down to Houston. He said he wanted to talk about a potential collaboration. He used words like exciting and synergy, and really showcase what this family can do together. I drove down on a Thursday, told my production job I'd be out a day, and sat across from Daniel in his corner office with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the framed magazine profiles on the wall. He had a pitch deck open on his laptop. He turned it toward me. We're repositioning 3 of the venues, he said, going higher end. I want to bring in a curated retail element, small batch artisan goods, that kind of thing. It would be good for you. Exposure. Access to our clientele. I looked at the deck. There was a whole section on proprietary aesthetic direction for the retail program. The language was vague, but the visual references were not. They were my work, not inspired by my work. My actual pieces, photographed from my Instagram, dropped into a corporate presentation. These are my designs, I said. They're references, he said. I'm asking if you'd want to develop something exclusive for us. I told him I was interested in a conversation, but I'd need to understand the terms clearly before anything moved forward. I was careful. I was also taking photographs of his screen with my phone under the table while he talked. The next week he sent me a consulting agreement. 12 pages. Buried in Section 7, Subsection 4, was a clause granting Caldwell Hospitality Group perpetual, royalty-free rights to any creative work produced in connection with the engagement, including work created using CHG resources, premises, or relationships. I called an attorney named Patricia Osei, who had a small IP practice in Austin and came recommended by a designer friend of mine. We sat in her office and she read the contract in about 15 minutes. Do not sign this, she said. I know. This clause would give them ownership of anything you make while working with them. Practically speaking, they could argue that any piece you create during the engagement period belongs to the company. I figured. Have you been sharing design work with them already? I showed her the photograph of the pitch deck slide. She looked at it for a long time. When did they use these images? Last week. Without asking. Okay, she said. I want you to go home and send me every email you have with your brother about this project, going back to the beginning. And I want you to file copyright registrations on your 5 most distinctive design series this week. Today, if possible. I filed 6 series that afternoon. Copyright Office, formal registration, time-stamped and documented. I also sent Daniel a short email saying I appreciated the opportunity but had questions about the contract terms and would be in touch after I'd reviewed it with counsel. He replied within an hour. You're bringing lawyers into a family project? Come on, Maya. We're trying to do something good here. I saved that email too. I didn't sign the contract. I told Daniel I wasn't ready to move forward on those terms, and I'd be happy to discuss something more straightforward when he had time. He stopped calling after that. The weekly check-in text from my mother's phone, "How are you, honey? Hope work is going well." Those slowed down and eventually stopped. My cousin's birthday dinner in Houston. I didn't get an invitation until 2 days after it happened. I saw the photos on Facebook. It wasn't dramatic. That was the thing about the way my family operated. Nobody made a scene. They just quietly adjusted their orbit until you were on the outside of it, looking in, and you couldn't point to a single moment when it happened. My father called once, in the fall. He sounded tired, distracted, the way he always did when he was between the two of them, and didn't want to be. Your mother says you've been difficult about the CHG project. I asked to review the contract terms. That's not difficult. That's normal. Daniel's trying to build something here. The company has had a hard couple of years. We need everyone pulling in the same direction. I'm not refusing to work with him. I'm refusing to sign over my intellectual property. A pause. You know, he said, sometimes I think you enjoy making things complicated. I didn't say anything. When you're ready to be reasonable about it, let us know. Your mother would like to hear from you. He hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store and stared at the dashboard for a few minutes. Then I went inside and bought the ingredients for pasta because it was Tuesday and I had work in the morning and I was not going to let this be the thing that broke me. 2 months before the anniversary party, my mother called with the news that they were planning something big. 30 years, she said. A real celebration. The Lakeshore Club. The good one in River Oaks. 120 guests. She described the floral arrangements in detail. I'd love to be there, I said. A brief pause. Of course, she said. Of course, honey. I'll put you on the list. She did not put me on the list. I found out 3 weeks before the party when I asked about the details, and my mother went quiet for just a beat too long. Maya, she said, I need to be honest with you. And then she explained that Daniel had organized the evening partly as a business event, that some of the guests were potential investors in CHG's new concept, and that given the tension around the project, she thought it might be better if I sat this one out. It's my parents' anniversary, I said. I know that, sweetie. But your energy around all of this has been very negative, and Daniel needs. You're uninviting me from your anniversary party. I'm asking you to be mature enough to understand that timing matters. I didn't shout. I didn't cry, not right then. I said, okay, Mom, I understand. Because I did understand. I understood completely. I just wasn't going to let them write the ending of this story. Here's what I'd been working on for the previous 8 months, quietly, without telling my family a single thing about it. A woman named Claire Ashworth ran the accessories acquisitions division at Voss & Lane. She'd found my work through a boutique in Dallas that carried one of my series, the Meridian Collection, angular pieces with a hammered bronze finish that had taken me 2 years to develop. She'd reached out by email in January, professional and specific about what she liked and why. We'd had 4 calls before she flew to Austin to see the studio in person. She spent 3 hours there. She held every piece. She asked questions that showed she actually understood what I was doing structurally, not just aesthetically. By March, we were in negotiation. By June, we had an agreement in principle. By August, we had a signed contract, a multi-year collaboration, Meridian designs produced in partnership with V&L, distributed through their retail channels nationwide. $400,000 in year 1, with escalators. Full creative credit. My name on every piece. My attorney Patricia reviewed every page. The IP provisions were the opposite of what my brother had tried to put in front of me. Everything I created remained mine. CHG was not mentioned anywhere in the document. It had no claim on any of it. You've been protecting your work carefully this whole time, Patricia told me when we finalized everything. That matters. They can't touch this. I asked her one more question. I told her about the pitch deck, about the meeting in Daniel's office, about the images of my work that he'd shown to investors as part of CHG's planned retail concept. I asked if that was something I should address publicly. She thought about it. Do you have documentation of the pitch deck? I sent her the photograph from my phone and the follow-up emails. Do you want to address it? She asked. Or do you want to protect yourself? Both, I said. The Architectural Digest piece came about separately, through a writer named Jonah Ferris who covered the intersection of design and entrepreneurship. He'd profiled 2 other independent jewelers, and someone had recommended he reach out to me. We talked for an hour the first time, 2 hours the second. He was meticulous and fair. He asked about my background, my process, my business, and eventually he asked about the challenges of building something independent when you came from a family business environment. I told him. I showed him the emails. I showed him the pitch deck photograph. I showed him the contract clause. I gave him Patricia's legal analysis. I gave him the copyright registration dates. He took 3 weeks to verify everything independently before the piece was written. There's risk in this, he told me, when we reviewed the final draft together. I know. Your family will respond. It could get messy. I thought about the anniversary party invitation that never came. I thought about sitting at the end of the table at every family dinner, pushing food around a plate while my father asked Daniel about growth projections. I thought about my mother saying your energy is very negative. Let it, I said. The Voss & Lane announcement and the AD piece were timed together, the announcement at 9 p.m., the night of my parents' anniversary party. I didn't choose that date to hurt them. I chose it because V&L had a specific launch window tied to their fall editorial calendar, and when Jonah asked what timing made sense for the piece, I told him the same window worked for me. I won't pretend there wasn't a part of me that thought, let them be celebrating when they find out. I was on my couch eating pad, CE when my phone started going. Daniel first, then 3 unknown numbers within 2 minutes. Then my mother. I let Daniel's call go to voicemail. I listened to it later. He was trying to stay controlled, but his voice kept slipping. I need you to call me back right now. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is not how you handle family business. You've made us look like criminals. There are people at this party right now who are reading this on their phones. Call me back. I didn't call him back. I called Patricia instead, because she'd told me to call her before I talked to anyone. They'll threaten legal action, she said. Let them. The copyright registrations are dated before any of their pitch deck activity. The emails show the timeline. The contract clause you refused to sign is still in their draft folder. They have no case. What do I do tonight? Nothing, she said. Tonight you let the documentation speak. That's what it's for. My mother called 3 times. On the 4th call, I picked up. She wasn't crying. That would have been easier. She was cold in the particular way she got when she felt that the social order of something had been disrupted. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I told a journalist the truth about what happened with my designs. You ambushed us. On our anniversary. In front of every person that matters to us in this city. Mom, I found out about my own exclusion from your anniversary party through a calendar hold you accidentally forwarded to me. You didn't have the conversation with me. You had the conversation at me. We were trying to protect. You were protecting Daniel. You've always been protecting Daniel. A long silence. What do you want? She said finally. It sounded like my brother. Name your price. Let's end this. An apology? A position? You want us to publicly retract something? I want my work to be my work. I want my name on the things I made. I want to stop being erased from my own family every time it becomes inconvenient to include me. You're being dramatic. The contract Daniel sent me had a clause that would have given CHG ownership of everything I designed during the engagement. The pitch deck he showed investors contained photographs of my pieces taken directly from my Instagram without permission. I have both of those documented. That's not drama. That's evidence. Another silence. Longer this time. You should have come to us directly, she said finally. I did. I came to you directly. You told me Daniel was under stress and I needed to be reasonable. She hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a while after that. My Thai food had gone cold. Outside my window I could hear someone in the parking lot laughing at something, that careless outdoor laugh that people have when they're having a good time and they're not thinking about anything heavy at all. I envied it for about 30 seconds. Then I opened my laptop and looked at the response. The AD piece had gotten significant traction within the first 2 hours. Design Twitter, jewelry community accounts, a few business writers picking it up. The comments ran in 2 directions. One side. This is why independent creatives need to protect their IP. This is what corporate appropriation of small business work looks like. Document everything. The other side. She's destroying her family for a press moment. This should have stayed private. I read both sides. I didn't respond to either. What I did respond to were the direct messages. A ceramicist in Portland, who said she'd spent 2 years consulting for her father-in-law's home goods brand under a vague agreement, watched her signature glazework end up in their catalog, and never said anything because she was afraid of the family fallout. A textile designer in Atlanta who said she'd been brought into her sister's boutique operation, contributed original prints, and found them on wholesale platforms 6 months later with her name nowhere on them. A 23-year-old in Phoenix who said she was a photography student and her uncle had offered to help her get exposure by using her portfolio in his real estate marketing, and she hadn't known if it was okay to say, no. I answered each one the same way. Yes, it's okay to say no. File the registrations first. Get the paperwork before you commit. Keep every email. The morning after, CHG's social media went quiet. The reservations page for 2 of their venues had a notification about system maintenance. Daniel's LinkedIn profile, which had previously listed creative direction as one of his competencies, had been edited. My father called at 7 in the morning. I was already awake. I'd been awake since 5. He sounded like he hadn't slept. He sounded old in a way I hadn't heard from him before. Maya. Hi, Dad. A pause long enough that I counted to 6. I need to say something to you, and I need you to let me say it without interrupting, because I'm going to lose my nerve if you do. I said okay. I knew about the pitch deck. Not all of it. But I knew Daniel had been drawing on your work, your visual language, in the presentations. I asked him about it once, and he said he was just using it as inspiration, mood board material, that kind of thing. I chose to believe that because it was easier than not believing it. His voice dropped. Because the company has been struggling. Because I built that business over 20 years, and watching it have a hard run has been difficult for me. And because Daniel is... He stopped. Your heir, I said. That was wrong. The way we've done this. The way we've treated your work. The way your mother and I handled the party. All of it. I let it happen. I looked the other way. And I let them push you out. And I kept telling myself you'd be fine because you always are fine, because you've always landed on your feet without our help, as if that excused it. I didn't say anything. I was pressing one thumbnail into the pad of my other thumb very hard, just to feel something concrete. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, he said. I know that's not a thing that happens in a phone call. But I wanted to hear you say whether we've lost you completely. I took a breath. I don't know yet, Dad. I genuinely don't know. That's fair, he said quietly. That's more than I deserve. Is Mom going to call? A beat. I don't know. You know how she is. She processes things slow. Tell her I'm not waiting. I'll tell her. And tell her I thought about it. Tell her that I loved her. That I spent a lot of years wanting her approval and I'm done waiting for it. But that what I wanted was for her to be proud of me. Not to disappear. He was quiet for a moment. She is proud of you, he said. She just doesn't know how to show it when it conflicts with something else she wants. That's not enough, I said. That stopped being enough a long time ago. We hung up. I made coffee. I sat at my workbench in the back corner of my apartment, the good one I'd bought secondhand from a retiring jeweler in San Marcos, and I looked at the piece I'd been working on before everything happened. A long cuff, copper and oxidized silver, geometric cutwork along the edge. I picked up my file and kept working. Daniel texted 2 days later. Can we talk? Not about business, just us. I looked at the message for most of a morning. Then I called him. He answered immediately, which surprised me. He'd clearly been waiting. I don't know where to start, he said. The pitch deck would be a reasonable place. A long exhale. I told myself I was showcasing what a collaboration with you could look like. That I was doing you a favor by getting your aesthetic in front of investors. You used my work without asking. You presented it as CHG creative direction. I know. You sent me a contract that would have given the company perpetual rights to everything I made. The lawyers drafted that. I should have read it before I sent it. Daniel. I kept my voice even. You knew what was in that contract. You're the COO. You run that company. Don't tell me your lawyers slipped a clause past you. Silence. No, he said finally. You're right. I read it. I thought you'd probably ask to change it and we'd negotiate. I didn't think it was as serious as it turned out to be. It was always that serious. I just wasn't in a position where anyone believed me about it. He was quiet again. I waited. I'm not going to ask you to retract anything, he said. I know that's probably what you expected. Mom wants me to, but I'm not going to. Another pause. What you said in the article was accurate. I used your work. I pressured you to sign something that wasn't fair. And when you pushed back, we stopped including you. That was all real. Yes, I said. It was. I don't know if this matters, but I'm going to issue a statement. Acknowledge what happened. Not because the board is telling me to, they are, but not only for that, because you're my sister. Because what I did wasn't right. I thought about what it would cost him. His credibility with the investors at the party. The narrative CHG had been trying to maintain. I thought about whether I cared about any of that. If you do it, I said, make it real. Don't do the my sister and I have different perspectives version. Say what you actually did. Okay. I'm not going to forgive you in the next 5 minutes, Daniel. I want you to know that, but I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen either. What comes after this depends on what you actually do. I understand. One more thing. The employees at CHG, who had nothing to do with any of this, I'm not going to do anything to hurt the company further. The documentation I shared was about what happened to me. It wasn't a campaign. His voice softened. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. He posted the statement the following morning. I read it sitting on my apartment floor, my back against the couch, coffee in one hand. He said my designs had been used without authorization. He said the consulting agreement he'd presented had terms that weren't fair. He said that when I'd raised concerns, the family had responded by pushing me out, rather than engaging honestly, and that he accepted responsibility for his role in that. He apologized. He didn't qualify it. He didn't say if anyone was hurt or to the extent that. He said, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. The comments were predictable. Some praised him for taking accountability. Some said it was too little too late. Some said it didn't matter. The damage was done. He didn't respond to any of them. My mother never called. My father texted to say she'd read the statement and that she was struggling with it, that she wasn't ready to reach out. I wrote back, okay, I meant it. I'd spent enough years waiting. The Voss and Lane collaboration launched 8 weeks later. My name on every piece, in the display cards, in the campaign materials, in the editorial spread they ran in 3 regional publications. I flew to New York for the launch event. It was small by industry standards. Maybe 60 people in a gallery space in Tribeca. I stood in the middle of the room watching people hold the pieces and ask questions, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Claire Ashworth introduced me by saying, Maya Caldwell has been building something exceptional for years, mostly without anyone making it easy for her. We think it's time that changes. I gave a short speech. Nothing formal, just a few minutes. I talked about what it means to protect your work. I talked about documentation, about copyright registration, about reading contracts carefully. I talked about how I'd had to learn the hard way, that being accommodating and being respected are not the same thing, and that the moment I started treating my work as worth protecting was the moment other people started treating it that way too. Afterward, a woman came up to me, mid-30s, good suit, firm handshake. She introduced herself as a product developer at a consumer goods company. She said she'd heard about my situation through the AD article and had shared it with her entire team. We have 3 people right now dealing with IP questions around collaborative projects, she said. Your story gave them language for something they didn't know how to name. I thought about the 23-year-old in Phoenix, who didn't know if it was okay to say no to her uncle. Document everything, I told her. From the very beginning, before you feel like you need to. 6 months after the anniversary party, I went back to Houston for the first time since everything happened. My father had asked if he could see me. I said yes on the condition that it was just us, not a family dinner, not a reconciliation event, just 2 people having a meal. We met at a diner near the medical center, not one of the CHG venues. He was there before me, sitting at a booth by the window, looking at the menu, even though I suspected he'd already decided what to order. He'd lost some weight. He looked tired in the particular way that comes from months of stress. Not one bad night. He stood up when I came in, which he'd never done before. A small thing. I noticed it. We talked for almost 3 hours, about his parents, whom I'd barely known, about starting CHG, the early years before it was successful, the times he'd been close to folding, about what he'd wanted for Daniel and what he'd wanted for me, and how those 2 things had somehow become incompatible in his mind without him ever consciously deciding that. About how he'd looked at me as someone who didn't need things, who was resilient, who would land on her feet, and how he'd used that story about me to let himself off the hook. I made you self-sufficient, he said. And then I used your self-sufficiency as a reason not to show up for you. Yeah, I said. You did. I don't expect that to be okay. It's not. but I understand it better now than I did before. He asked if I'd consider ever consulting for CHG, not on design, but on how they handled creative contractors, how they structured agreements, how they made sure people who contributed work were credited and compensated fairly. He said he was rebuilding the leadership structure, and he wanted to build it differently. I told him not yet. I told him to ask me again in a year. He nodded, and he didn't push, and I thought, maybe that's what actually trying looks like. Not the grand gesture, just stopping when someone says stop. My mother sent me a card in December, a generic one, the kind with a printed sentiment and a signature. It said she thought about me often and hoped I was well. No apology, no acknowledgement of anything specific, just her name, in her careful handwriting. I put it on my workbench. I didn't throw it away. I'm not sure what that means yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe that I'm not the kind of person who needs to make a final decision about everyone all at once. Daniel texted me on my birthday. Just, happy birthday, Maya. I hope Austin is treating you well. I texted back, thanks, it is. That was the whole conversation. We're not close. We may never be close. But we've stopped pretending the other person doesn't exist, and that's something. I'm in Austin. My studio is 3 times the size it was 2 years ago. I have 2 part-time assistants, which still feels surreal to say. The Voss and Lane pieces sold out in the first retail cycle, and we're already in discussions about year 2. I have a waiting list for the independent Meridian pieces that's 5 months long. Last month, a student in a jewelry design program emailed me to ask how I'd known when it was time to protect my work legally, if I'd been scared to formalize it because it might damage the relationship with my family. I thought about the answer for a long time before I wrote back. I told her, I wasn't protecting my work from my family. I was protecting it because it was worth protecting. The fact that my family tried to take it was a separate problem. But the documentation, the registrations, the paper trail, I would have built all of that regardless, because precision matters, and because the thing you make with your hands and your mind is yours, and you don't get to just assume that everyone around you will always agree on that. Register the copyright before you need it. Save the emails. Follow up every significant conversation in writing, not because everyone is out to get you, because your work deserves the same care you put into making it. I sent the email. Then I went back to the bench and picked up my file and kept working. If you've made it to the end of this, thank you for being here. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this story meant something to you, I'd really like to know. Hit subscribe if you want to hear what comes next, because there's a lot more to say. I'll see you in the next one.